Today we're looking at the rules of the ruler himself. Let's see what Szarekh the Silent King can do in game. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In this series we've been reviewing the datasheets from Codex Necrons. We looked at the Void Dragon a couple of days back, and I thought it was high time that we took a look at the Silent King. In this video we'll take a look at his many rules, any obvious combos or synergies in game, and a few things that I might think about when running him on the tabletop. Again, with much of the new Necron releases, I'm a big fan of the model. I know some people have criticised it a little bit from just looking like a bigger Necron than standard, but honestly in the backstory I'm not sure he's necessarily known for being absolutely enormous or over the top ornate, and I think that on his command days he looks like a fitting ruler for the Necron base. Money-wise, Games Workshop does seem to have done their thing of pricing him to the points rather than to the amount of plastic that you get. Not that he's a small kit, but it does turn out that he's a pretty whopping £95 or $150 US. If you're in the UK, you can think about buying him through a discounter. Element Games has him at £76, and you can find a link to that in the video description below if you're interested. 20% does amount to quite a lot when you're taking it off quite a big price. In the background, Szarekh the Silent King is integral to the history of the Necrons. He was the leader of the Triarch who ruled the Necrons at the time when they had the great biotransference which swapped their skin for living metal. Angry and embittered that much of his race had been left as semi-sentient walking zombies, it was he who betrayed the Catan after the war in heaven had been won, shattering the very gods into Catan shards and imprisoning them in Tesseract labyrinths. Now the Necrons have been beginning to reawaken in earnest in the 41st millennium. The Silent King has once more returned to the galaxy to command his forces and lead them against the Imperium in the battles for the Pariah Nexus. In battle he'll typically be commanding his Saracen dynasty and legions of Triarch Praetorian elites with which to sweep his foes before him. All very nice, so let's see what he can do on the tabletop. So Szarekh the Silent King is a 450 points or 23 power Lord of War choice for Codex Necrons. He comes as essentially a 3 model unit with himself and his 2 Triarchal Menhirs, but you can put him in a Supreme Command detachment, which means it's actually very easy to field in a Necron list. He is a Szarekh model, but he also has the Dynastic Agent keyword, which means he won't get in the way of command protocols or anything, and as he has to be your Warlord, you can put him in the Supreme Command detachment at no command point cost. Keywords wise, he is a vehicle, which can be quite helpful for healing him, he can fly, he's a noble, and is a Szarekh Dynastic Agent and a Pharaon. For a whopping 450 points, his profile is pretty impressive as you'd expect. He has a movement of 8, weapon skill and ballistic skill of 2+, strength 5, toughness 7, 16 wounds, 6 attacks, leadership 10 and a 3+ save. He does degrade as he goes down the profiles in the normal way, but the only things that he drops are being able to move a bit slower, his number of attacks drops, and as he goes down to lower profiles, he's not able to use the Staff of Stars at 8 wounds or less, and not able to use the Scythe of Dust at 4 wounds or less, and loses the Pharaon of the Stars and Pharaon of Blades auras at those levels respectively. It basically represents his 2 little minions getting knocked out, I presume, so he's really not all that great in close combat when he's on his last 4 wounds. The Triarchal Menhirs that float alongside him also have movement 8, air weapon skill 6, ballistic skill 2+, strength 5, toughness 7 again, 5 wounds, 1 attack, leadership 10 and a 3+ save. All models in the unit are also augmented by a 4+ infall save, but unfortunately he doesn't have any quantum shielding or anything. It does mean that he's fairly respectably tough for his profile. He's got essentially 26 wounds, and your opponent will have the potential to lose some overkill damage when he overkills the Triarchal Menhirs. He's certainly not invincible though, and if he's the only threat that your opponent's army can focus on, he will go down in fairly short order. Again, for the leader of the Necron race, he is packing some pretty powerful war gear. First of all, those 2 Triarchal Menhirs both have Annihilator beams. They're 36-inch range, heavy 1 weapons with strength 12, AP -4 and a flat damage of 6. They'll be hitting on 2s and usually wounding on 3s if you're targeting anything tough, and on average that typically equates to around about 1 of those wounds going through on a standard vehicle per turn. Though of course it's very swingy, you're either going to get 0, 6 or 12 wounds through. It is going to feel very satisfying indeed though when you're on turn 1 and you just delete a Leman Russ tank or something without even thinking about it. Both Szarekh himself and the Pharaon of the Stars also have some range damage output. Szarekh can shoot his Sceptre of Eternal Glory, it's 24 inches, assault 3, strength 8, AP -3 and damage 2. So likely to do some good chip damage to basically anything. It'll go straight through Marines, that one. The Pharaon of the Stars can attack with his Staff of Stars, which is an assault 9 weapon, 24 inches, strength 6, AP -2 and damage 1. Pretty useful for just putting a few more wounds on any infantry squad. In melee, Szarekh is an absolute beast. He has a special rule that makes enemy units fight last when they're in combat with him, which is really powerful, and it means that you're really not going to want to charge him. He attacks himself with his Scepter of Eternal Glory, that's strength 9, AP -3 and damage 2. Maybe not the most overwhelming in the world, but you add that to the Staff of Stars and Scythe of Dust that his minions have. The Staff of Stars is strength 5, AP -2 and damage 1, and you get 3 attacks with it, so not all that strong. But the Scythe of Dust is really quite impressive. You get 4 attacks with that, at strength 8, AP -4 and damage 3. All in all, you're going to be doing around about 6 or 7 dead Primaris Marines with that damage output, or a pretty impressive around about 12 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. It's really not something that you're going to want to tangle with, and it means that opponents who have to deal with him in melee are really going to struggle. That's because they're always going to be fighting last. It means that they're going to have to charge him with something that can weather all of that crazy damage output, and then somehow still be in some sort of shape to be able to fight back. In general, he's very tough, and decently strong both at range and in melee. Now let's get on to his many special rules then. First of all, we have all the rules that actually make him better as a unit himself. He has Living Metal, which will regenerate 1 wound per turn, always useful. He has Command Protocols, which he can act as a character for to give them to other units, and of course he'll benefit from them himself. He has Noctilith Beacons, which allows him to deny the Witch as if he were a Psyker once per turn. Not a bad thing to have, seeing as he's likely to be going down the centre of the table. Having just 1 clutch deny in your back pocket could be really decent if your opponent just has 1 powerful psychic power that they really need to get off. We already mentioned his Obsolescence generators. It means that if they're within engagement range of him, then enemy units can't fight until all other eligible units from your army have done so. Not only is this great for his own combat prowess, but if he's in combat alongside some Lich Guard or something, it's a way of keeping them safe as well. This honestly might be one of his most powerful special rules. He has Preservative Auto-Torpor. This is the special rule that means that you lose the Pharaon of the Stars and Pharaon of the Blades rules as you take damage, along with the Staff of Stars at 8 wounds and the Scythe of Dust at 4 wounds. His 4+ invul comes from a Transtemporal Force Field, and when he dies he can potentially go up with a really big bang. The Vengeance of the Enchained special rule represents that enslaved Star God breaking out, and on a 4+, everything within 2d6 inches will take a whopping d6 mortal wounds. If you think that your opponent does realistically have the firepower to be able to gun him down in 1 turn, it's worth making sure that he's not literally next to every single unit in your army, otherwise you do have the potential to lose a whole lot more of it. As per the buffs that he can give to other units, every single one of these rules can affect Core or Triarch Praetorians, as he's the only one that Triarch Praetorians answer to. He has My Will Be Done, to give you the +1 to hit on that unit, and as he's a Pharaon he can use it twice. He also has the other standard Overlord one, Relentless March, a 6-inch aura of +1 to their movement characteristics. And then he has the reroll auras from Pharaon of the Stars, which gives him a 6-inch aura of rerolling hits at range. Could be useful for things like Immortals or Triarch Praetorians with Rods of the Covenant. It is a bit of a shame that he's not going to be able to affect the majority of the Necron big guns though, due to the core keyword restriction. To be honest, I think his Pharaon of Blades special rule is more powerful. This one's a 6-inch aura of rerolling wound rolls in melee, and I think that the core units give him far more choice of powerful targets for this, particularly with elite units such as Lich Guard or Triarch Praetorians. Finally, he's got a trio of special rules that buff his army. Firstly, his Voice of the Triarch special rule can allow him to monkey with the command protocols once they've already been established. You can use one of the ones that you haven't selected and swap it in for one that you've decided to have in that battle round. It means that while Zarekh's on the board, you could say keep the Protocol of the Hungry Void in reserve until you have actually managed to commit with the opponent to melee and get the +1 to strength on all your Necron units. He has the Silent King special rule, where he must be your warlord if he's included in your army, and he also gives 3 command points if he is. That means if you just managed to use 1 Necron detachment, and you've got him in a Supreme Command detachment, you're going to be starting on a very respectable 15 command points. Finally, seeing as he has to be your warlord, his warlord trait will generally be in effect. Unfortunately, it's the Zarekhan one, which is quite a good one. Again, this is to mess with your command protocols, and it means that if you want to, you can select 4 command protocols, and you get to use one of them twice. So depending on what the rest of your list comprises of, you could have the same one in the first couple of battle rounds, perhaps to guarantee a little bit of extra range damage, or to buff your army in melee with Protocol of the Hungry Void on both turns 2 and turn 3, for example. It's really quite a nice effect, and it does allow you to build around your command protocols just that little bit more. In terms of buffs and synergies, he's a little bit limited being a big vehicle character, and of course he doesn't have the core keyword. He will get his built-in Zarekhan Dynasty reroll to wound, which could be pretty handy on those Triarchal Menhirs, and a 5+ Feel No Pain type save against mortal wounds, which is pretty good as it really helps counter one of the easier ways to kill him. In terms of character support, not a lot of characters will do all that much for him, but Technomancers or a Knoctet Spider could heal him as he is a vehicle, and if there is one handy nearby, then throwing an extra D3 wounds back on him per turn isn't a bad thing, particularly combined with Living Metal. I think if you're taking such an expensive model, you really do need to try and make use of as many of his rules as possible, so I think an escort of some core units would be a good idea for him. Things like Lichguard, Warriors, Immortals or Praetorians would be a good shout, and you might be able to get multiple squads within the aura range, potentially Lichguard and Praetorians at the front, with some advancing Warriors or Immortals to follow him up. It's certainly going to be very nice handy add +1 to hit on multiple units, on top of those excellent rerolls to wound in melee and to hit at range. In terms of command protocols that I think will be useful for him, the Conquering Tyrant is certainly a decent one. They can increase his auras to 9-inch range. I think that's really quite powerful when you've got such powerful auras built in the first place. It will just give you some freedom for your Warriors and Immortal squads to go and fan out onto objectives, while still getting some excellent rerolls to hit, and maybe even being in range of My Will Be Done. The Eternal Guardian one, turn 1, could be kind of good for light cover, though it's not that useful if you don't go first, because then you'll be wanting to move him. You could potentially use his special rule to change the command protocol, and flex out whether you get light cover turn 1 at the start of the battle round. To be honest, it might just be better to focus the command protocols on his minions rather than thinking how they'll affect him too much. He does have a few stratagems that can be used on him. Probably my favourite is Stellar Alignment Protocol, and this one allows him to fight on his top profile, which could be very relevant indeed in melee if he is down to something like 4 wounds or less. It'll make the difference between him just having 2 attacks or him having all 6. A few other interesting ones are Techno-Oracular Targeting to automatically wound with one of those Annihilators perhaps. You could have Eternal Protectors for extra attacks with Lichguard when they're next to him. You can ensure that you get the other Warlord traits as well as him for 1 command point each. You could potentially ignore cover with a Solar Pulse if you really want to clear out some Primaris Marines or something with his shooting. And if you really want to put a spanner in the enemy's psychic works, then you can use the Szarekh unique stratagem to negate a power within 18 inches on the roll of 4+. Between that and his own denial ability, it's really going to be bad news for enemy psychers. As is often the case with really big fighty things like this guy though, possibly the best value you could get out of command points might be re-rolling a charge if he does happen to fail one. So how would I think about using this guy in-game then? Firstly, I'd certainly consider the Necron secondary objective, Code of Combat. This gives you 3 victory points for each enemy unit killed by a noble, and he is a noble. And with this much power in the shooting and fight phase, there is a reasonable chance he will be killing multiple units over the course of the battle. Could be quite a powerful one to pick if he is included in your army. When setting him up, I'd want to deploy him fairly centrally. His 8-inch movement isn't enormous, and you really can't afford for your opponent to just run away from him, and deny him all his very nice combat abilities. He is quite a big model, so hiding him will be hard. If you do have any opportunistic line of sight blocking terrain, that's never a bad thing though. Ideally, I think in a list with a Silent King, you want multiple pushing threats that the opponent's really going to want to deal with, so hopefully something will get through. I think you'll certainly do better with that, rather than just having him go up all by himself and have everything else sit back, because everything's just going to get focused on the Silent King. I typically want to fire the Menhirs fairly early in the shooting phase, as they can be very swingy whether they do anything at all, or absolutely rinse a vehicle, and they're so powerful that I'd certainly think about command rerolls if they fail to hit or wound. Ideally, I think you want a couple of core units to follow him around to get the benefits from My Will Be Done and those auras, and I think the dream would be to charge both him and a really fighty combat unit like Lichguard into the enemy, to use that aura of obsolescence to allow all the attacks to take place before the enemy even gets to strike. It puts paid to any interruption with the counter-offensive stratagem. It's pretty useful on the defensive as well. Certain units just aren't going to be able to effectively charge him. Say for example, if you had a Blood Angels Death Company squad with 5 guys with Thunderhammers, they're not going to want to charge him because they'll just have to fight last and he'll likely kill them before they even get to swing. It's really not that easy if your opponent really has to try and deal with him in combat rather than at range. Finally, if he is looking like he's on his last legs wounds-wise, I'd think about trying to get him away from your key units, as he might well just explode all over them and kill them with mortal wounds. It might even be worth just having one last death charge at the enemy units, even if he knows that he's going to die. Just having a 4+ chance of exploding and doing d6 mortal wounds to multiple enemy threats could be a really good last use of him if he does look like he's going down. I think it's a little bit hard to weigh up just how good he is, seeing as we haven't seen him on the table yet, and he really does have quite a lot going on, but for me he sounds like a very nasty threat and something that your opponent just can't ignore. Much like the Catan in the army, he's really going to cause problems if the opponent doesn't deal with him early. He has incredibly powerful abilities, but also really quite a weighty points cost. But if I had to guess, I would expect him to be seeing play in at least some competitive lists. Either way, he looks like he'd be enormously fun to use in game, and I think they've done well with representing the rule of the Necron race and this very nice looking miniature. So let me know your thoughts on him down in the comments below, including if I've made any rules errors or mistakes. It's always a bit tricky trying to process new rules like this when there's so much going on. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. We'll certainly be keeping the Necron content coming over the coming months. Finally, if you'd like to help support the channel, I'd just like to mention that I do have an Element Games affiliate link down in the video description below. Element Games is a discount retailer based in the UK, giving 10 to 20% off Warhammer products. If you were thinking about ordering anything in the near future, consider giving it that link a click and ordering through them. A small amount of the profits go to help support Auspex Tactics, and it doesn't cost you any more whatsoever when you buy. They do have this guy available, and he's £76 at time of recording. I do have a similar link for Amazon in the USA and Canada. Again, that works in a very similar way. If you just give it a click and order through there, then a small amount goes to help support the channel, and it doesn't cost you any more whatsoever when you buy. And of course, Amazon basically stocks everything. A big thank you to all of you guys who have been doing that. It really does help justify me spending quite so long making videos about model soldiers. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.